Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a video for you about this little guy right here. This is the WinterBlade Co. Severn. That's not like seven, the number, that's like Severnaya, the ill-fated weapons facility in GoldenEye. Anyways, moving on, old reference. This is a very, very interesting piece. Very weird, as, well, I said WinterBlade Co., so you could pretty much intuit that part. But it's interesting, and I'm definitely looking forward to taking a look inside. But first, before we go any further, I gotta let you know, this guy was sent to me by WinterBlade Co. He reached out, said, hey, Nick, I got a new thing coming. And at this point, he does enough strange stuff that's kind of off the beaten path that it's kind of like, yeah, okay, just send it. Right, I'm usually interested because he's usually doing something unusual and something I haven't seen before. Right, these days it is very, very hard for me to get interested in somebody else's new self-published, knife being made overseas. This is doing enough unusual things that I feel like, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm interested. But as always, he knows the story, right? He knows I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. It might be a gem, it might be junk, and he did still send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume that this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and this is someplace in between a production sample and a prototype, right? These are still in the process of being pre-ordered, so it is possible that there might be some small changes between here and the eventual version, although he has not mentioned any such changes, and normally he does when those things come up. So anyways, that's what we got going on here. Next up, what the heck is a WinterBlade Co? Well, actually, next up, let's do some size comparison real quick. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2 and the Spyderco Delica, and what you're going to see is, actually, this is not small. This is much bigger than I think anything else he's ever made. Well, okay, he's made publicly. Here it is next to the Spyderco PM2. And what we're going to see here is that in terms of sharpened length, the PM2 wins, because this has this big old choil in the front here. But in terms of handle size, they are quite nearly identical. So there is that. Then I do want to compare this guy against the, closest and most obvious competitor, that is the WinterBlade Co. Factor. And we're going to see that this is much, much smaller. The Factor is relative to the Severn. The Severn is a full-size knife, 100%. And what we see here is sharpened length. The Severn is larger as well. So there you go. They stick together. Anyways, so that's the size comparison here. So WinterBlade Co., and I'll go ahead and start my disassembly tool setup here. WinterBlade Co. is a weird person. I say with all the respect and appreciation, but absolutely bizarre human being. The stuff he comes up with is usually pretty out of left field and usually pretty innovative. Sometimes it's innovative in the sense of like, wow, why didn't anyone do that before? And sometimes it's innovative in the sense of, wow, it's very clear why no one has ever done this before. And usually the results are still compelling, right? I want to be very clear. I do appreciate his work very much, and this is sort of unusual, and there is only one magnet on this. And that is actually right here. The thumb stud is actually held on by this magnet here. And so you can remove the thumb stud if you would rather not have a thumb stud at all, which, being honest with you, I don't know why this knife needs a thumb stud to start with. But anyways, that is the only magnet that is available. I think I might have just put that magnet on backwards. But anyways, unless I was a lefty, in which case it would, I think, be forward. Anyways, so there is less magnetism in this than in his normal builds. But let's go on ahead and take this little guy apart. I'm thinking T8, yep. T8 in the back there, a little bit of thread locker, nothing too terrible. Put that in the back there. It looks like we're going to have to flip-flop disassemble this guy, because I'm not necessarily feeling the love to take the clip out there. And then I'll take the pivot out from the other side here. We're removing those three. The thing that I'm very curious about is the inner functionings of this lock, right? This is a sliding bar style lock in every meaningful way, but it also has this little lever up here on the top that allows you to basically disengage the lock just using your index finger. You can think about it as being sort of a way to manipulate the sliding bar. It feels like maybe this is just attached to the whole carrier unit that the bar itself is a part of, and it's no longer like a tube in the classical... I swear, I just had another sliding bar lock around. Either way, it's not like a classical sliding bar lock sort of thing. Here we go. There's the the NAF's Lander 2. This is a classical sliding bar lock, so to speak, with a literally cylinder that slides back and forth along the back of the knife, whereas this feels like it's doing something a little different, a little weird. Again, WinterBlade Co., so I didn't need to say that part. And then let's pop out the pivot here. and we should be ready to disassemble this guy. My hope, my dream, my fondest desire is I'll just be able to lift this part off somehow. That does not seem to be the case, so what the heck. Could be that there is an overabundance of thread locker in there. Could be that the tolerances are just very tight, making it harder, or it could be that there is an additional scale, or I'm sorry, an additional screw in there. No, that's not the case, because there's not an additional liner underneath the titanium in the back here. So, that's kind of pushing me towards maybe the tolerances are fairly tight, and as a result, yeah, okay, whoa, okay, there's a spring in here. All right, that's actually very nice in that this, so what just happened there is I pulled back on the lock. That took some of the tension out of the system and allowed me to open this guy up. Okay, so here's what we're seeing. This is the sliding bar lock right here, right? What happens is this little surface is the part that engages with the blade itself, and you can pull this back and forth, and as you are doing so, that feels magnety. Is it, or is it just friction-y? It could just be grease, actually. Yeah, that's just grease. But anyways, what we have here is a sliding bar style lock, but better than, well, okay, maybe that's a little bit of a strong statement, but one of the big advantages this one has is that it is completely not dependent on another kind of spring. It doesn't have like an omega spring in there. It has one of these coiled spring jobbers, and that's going to just be a little bit more reasonable and hold up a little bit better over the long term. The next question, of course, becomes, how do I reinstall that? Because it wasn't tensioned properly. Oh, that's because this hole needs... Okay, this needs to be installed on this side such that the spring is compressed between... here. Oh, that spring is born to fly has, yeah. Yep, okay. So now when I do it, it compresses this spring. There we go. Don't worry, I'm wearing a Batman mask for safety. That will prevent anything from hitting any part of my face that isn't my eyes, which is actually quite unsafe now that I think about it. Anyways, so that's how this guy works. We see it is just a sliding bar style lock at its core in terms of its functionality, but it is doing so in a very different way. There is, it's quite the little neck this guy has on it. Interesting. But anyways, yeah, so it functions a lot like a sliding bar lock, but without omega springs, which is very, very nice. Not like omega springs, but omega springs that are, you know, like, well, shaped like an omega. That probably doesn't help. Okay, they're shaped like this, except upside down. Anyways, not like the Y. Okay, I'm going to stop. It's been a day. It has been a day. But anyways, we are going to go on ahead and clean this guy off and out. This was definitely heavily greased. Oh, okay. And then this little piece of... Is this steel? By the way, I'm using the factor to check that. Yeah, this is a steel. So the bearings go against the steel, and the important parts of the lock are all in this steel plate. So that's kind of cool. Okay, and then I'm not going to be able to remove this part on the other side here, but that's okay. I don't need to. If I did need to, I could just unscrew here and here and do so. But I can just clean it off as such. No freaking problems. Okay, now I want to clean off these bearings here. That's fine. Degrease a little bit in here. I'm very curious how this is I'm going to put this back together with a relatively viscous oil instead of a grease, mostly because I'm curious how it's going to go. It may be that I actually have to grease this guy, that it is not happy without the kind of heavier grease that's on there, in which case I will, well, learn that. But in the meantime, I kind of would like to standardize the lubrication on my knives, and very often this kind of weight of grease can be substituted with some kind of an oil pretty straightforwardly. And then it really does seem like this little guy right here, with the possible exception of the spring pushing back against it, which kind of pops it down by default, like this. Yeah, that's literally just a little tiny pivot on there, and then you can pull that up by the jimping, and that just allows you to push this little carrier bolt back. Yeah, honestly, this is a pretty clean design. It's pretty straightforward. I like it. I like very much the fact that we don't have the omega springs, which really are a known source of weakness in the usual sort of approach. Is this the, yeah. What I'm going to go on ahead and use here, I'm going to try out is KPL Heavy. Knife Pivot Lube Heavy. This feels like it's a place calling for a little bit of heavitude, so we're going to give it a shot. Right? Right? Okay, yeah, it's a little thicker. So we're going to go ahead and just lubricate up that little bit there. I'm going to go on ahead and lubricate up the pivot here. Okay, what side goes? Oh, well, this is the wrong size hole. So clearly this goes over here. Oop, looks like we got some dirt over here. Dirt, grease, one away DLC, whatever. Is this free spinning? The pivot itself is not, but it is free spinning on this side. That's a little frustrating, right? I generally would prefer to have the keyed portion of it be on the side that it installs from. That way you're never having to worry about the alignment of the pivot as you're putting things back together. But, you know, such is life. It's not the end of the world. It just means that I need to be careful to have the D shape facing backwards towards the back of the knife. Come on, get in there. Such that when I install everything else, we won't have that problem. Okay, how the heck do I want to do this? Well, clearly this goes here. And while I still have access to everything, well, actually, no, I'll just go ahead and I'll lubricate the sides of this whole piece here. I'm probably overdoing it here pretty substantially with the amount of lubrication I'm using. For those of you who are longtime fans or disdainers of the channel, that will be no shock. And I'll go ahead and just put a little bit right there because I see a little wear. And right there. And then go ahead and just scatter that to the wind here on the inside. Okay, so that should give us plenty of lubrication. And we can go on ahead and drop this into position. All right, so now what the heck am I doing? Here's the thing. I really should have taken this apart from the other side. I really should have pulled out these two screws from this side. In the future, when you do this, hopefully you're not following along directly, leave the screws on this side, because that would make things a little bit easier for me as I am going ahead and doing this. I'm going to see, just for my own edification, whether I can pull it off without transferring this post and this post to this side. But that would have made my life a lot easier, because I could just drop the blade on as it stands. Right here. But for the moment, we're going to go on ahead and give it a shot. I'm going to try and tension this spring in here. Maybe? Nope. Get in there. There we go. Okay, well, that does seem to be happily in place. So what I'm going to go on ahead and do now is give a little bit more lubrication of love in here. It's exactly incorrect to say. You have my apologies. The person responsible for that has been sacked. Okay, moving on. Let's go on ahead and put that there. Rotate, rotate, rotate. I think I can pull this off, actually. So what I do need to be secure about it, two things. A, I need to make sure the back part is facing the back of the knife. That is done. That should be all set. Then what I want to do is align these posts. Now, I am not going to be able to lower this down onto the knife in this state. It will not work because this part here is going to catch on the blade. In order to really seat this scale, I'm going to have to pull back on the lock here. So as I do this, hopefully not... There we go, there we go, there we go. Okay, there we go. I want to pull this a little further back now. Am I as far back as I can go? No, yeah, there we go. We're in. Hey, I think we're in. This is not fully seated, but that's okay. It should pull shut. I'm sorry if I already said this, but if you're curious about the tools I'm using to do this disassembly, go ahead and check out nickshabazz.com/tools. But anyways, my life would have been a little easier because I could have built everything from one side and then just lowered the other scale onto this had I removed these screws over here rather than over here. My desire not to remove the pocket clip was a little bit on the lazy side and ended up costing me a little bit. Okay, I'm not entirely convinced that the pivot is well seated. In fact, I'm fairly convinced that it isn't. My hope was that as I tightened this down, it would seat itself. But that dream is, I think, now gone from me. Is that seated fully? I'm going to remove the pivot here real quick. The danger of this is not super dangerous. No, I don't think it is. I think that it just needs a little bit of twisting this way. And unfortunately, this is not tooled on this side. What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to use this little guy here, which is a little piece of plastic that really can't press into anything. And scratch even the most fragile of coatings. And that'll allow me to rotate this just a little bit more. Come on. With the hope that now that I have done that, it will pull itself fully into position as I twist this. Maybe that is okay. It's very tight. The only danger of it not being fully seated there, and like I said, it may yet be fully seated, but the only danger there is that at some point in time it could rotate a little bit and become fully seated, and then my pivot is loose. That's not super dangerous. All that means is I'd have to retighten my pivot a little bit. Did that just pop a little bit more? Here, I'm going to try and... Yeah, I think that's in. Yeah, it's definitely too tight now. So let's just relax that slightly. I think I over-relaxed that, but that's okay. Over-relaxed is not a state I've been in for 5 years. Anyways, moving on. Let's go on ahead and 5. God, closer to 10 now. Moving on. 15? Okay, I need a vacation, and we need to finish putting this knife together, apparently. Yeah, probably 15 years. Let's go on ahead and put this here. And we should be roughly good to go. I think the pivot's too loose. No, it is not. There is no blade play. The action is super duper smooth. Oh boy. Is that pivot loose? No. No, it's not. Wow. It's just that much smoother. Turns out taking that grease out of there and putting in a decent, you know, looks like the KPL Heavy worked. I don't, very rarely do I ever use this. But in a situation like this where it's really standing in for grease, yeah, it actually makes a lot of sense. So anyways, I believe we are all set. Let me double check that I've screwed everything in sufficiently tightly. But yeah, we are, oh boy, are we good to go. That is better. Not that it was bad before, but holy crap, is that nice now. Let me put away my tools real quick so I don't stab myself with them accidentally. He says holding knives. If I'm worried about stabbing myself, it probably shouldn't be with a spudger. All right, moving on. So the Severn here. Very, very weird knife. Very interesting. Like I said, there was a lot to love about this guy. One thing I really appreciate aesthetically, and there were many, many variants of this, right? WinterBlade Co. is doing a whole bunch of different varieties of the Severn, ranging from this little guy right here that we are seeing. Oh, come off it. There we go. This little guy that we're seeing right here, which is titanium handles, and this is M390, but it's been lasered to look like a bacon Damascus. Looks pretty cool. cool, honestly. As a digital sort of person, this makes a lot of sense to me. But it's titanium and M390. This version right here is $369 pre-ordered. $279 for the aluminum version with M390 and just plain black M390, black coated that is. You can get one that's $189 in G10 and 14C28N, which is actually kind of cool that he's offering something that's a little bit more budget friendly. Mind you, it's still pretty pricey, right? For something being made overseas, that's a good chunk of change. But at the same time, yeah, that's pretty, it's nice that he's allowing people throughout the range to get access to this, right? So the price is okay, right? This guy's a little on the pricey side, certainly, for something being overseas made and etc., but it is also pretty unusual, right? It's kind of uncommon. This particular variety of sliding bar lock has not really been done, to my knowledge, and certainly not with this little guy up here, which is, he's calling it the stealth lock, which is apparently patent pending. There you go. So nice try, folks ripping it off. And you can tell that this is characteristically one of his designs in that it is well thought out, right? There were lots of really nice details here that make it clear that he's thinking about things. You know, a good clip, right? That's nice. The protrusion of the bar here is just about perfect. It's just where you want it to be. The removable thumb stud is a very, very nice touch, and it also makes it a fully ambidextrous thumb stud, right? Because you can pull it out and then just install it on the other side, and then you can flip the clip around. And because this guy is ambidextrous here, and this little stealth locky tab can be accessed from the middle, this becomes a knife that is completely open for lefties as well as for righties. That's actually, I think, been the case for the majority of his knives, right? This guy didn't have a bar going all the way through. This is, for what it's worth, a very, very different lock. It is also a sliding style lock, but yeah, it's very, very different relative to the Severn here. This is something that is, so in many ways, you also get other little details, like, for instance, this little guy, this little cutout here makes the thumb stud as well as the flicking hole a little bit more reasonable. By the way, look at the shape of the flicking hole here is not necessarily, like you can see here, it is, it's not necessarily normal. It doesn't have that same ting that some of the early factors had that really brought me some joy, but at the same time, that I can't hold it against it, right? Not everybody is as acoustically motivated. So, on the whole, like, the design is well thought out, and it really does have the same design DNA in a lot of ways as the factor here. It's not unclear at all that these things are related, and I really do appreciate that WinterBlade Co. has a design language that is quite strong and quite impressive, right? The other things that I'm appreciating about this, now that I've seen the inside of this mechanism, I like it even more. Right? Anytime you see one of these sliding bar locks, one of the first questions you should ask is, well, what about those Omega springs? Actually, I have a baggie here from the Lander that has Omega springs in them. Hold on. And I'm sitting here showing you my watch. Maybe I was just flexing subconsciously, or maybe superconsciously, I'm not sure. But anyways, this is what an Omega spring looks like, right? And normally on a sliding bar lock, the bar goes in here, this goes into the frame, and then the whole thing works by kind of compressing this lock. Thing is, these have a limited lifetime, right? You know, even the best made of them eventually do fail, which is why smart makers will include multiple Omega springs for you to just be able to swap them out later. But that is a point of weakness on conventional sliding bar locks, and the fact that he's gone to a coil spring, which tend, in my experience, not to have a similar fragility, if you will, that's kind of nice, right? And makes this a little bit more compelling that way. By the way, I should check for... Yeah, there's no vertical play, there's no horizontal play. That's solid as a freaking rock. The fact that it also happens to have this little tab up at the top there, that's kind of cool, right? Is it crucial? Absolutely not. This tab is, it's a neat little thing, and I will certainly admit that I've used it on a number of occasions to deploy the blade, but you can also deploy it just as readily with any of the other variety of methods here, even just pulling back on the lock itself. Right? Because it's an Axis-style sliding bar lock, you have all kinds of different opportunities. So, it's cool, but it's not in any particular way crucial. But I really do like the fact that this is an improvement in terms of the spring durability on your average sliding bar lock. By the way, look at this little carve-out here. That's another little detail. It makes it easier for your finger to get in here and then pull back on this. right? And by the way, it is worth noting that as you do this, the blade kind of does just want to fall open, right? And that is something that you're going to want to be a little bit thinking about, right? This could actually play, and, you know, these laws are very poorly defined and generally written out of fear rather than logic, as a result, not very good. But there are laws regarding things like gravity knives in many places, and so you're going to want to talk to your lawyer before you carry this if those laws, well, frankly, just period, it's a good idea to trust lawyers more than YouTubers, unless the YouTuber is also a lawyer, but more importantly, you want them to be your lawyer. That's different. Anyways, I digress. You don't want to talk to your lawyer there to make sure that, because this is not touching the blade in any meaningful way. What you do is you pull this back, and the knife just falls open, right? And it falls open with the force of gravity. That makes it very easy to deploy, but because of dumb laws that hopefully will get repealed, to support folks like AKTI and Knife Rights who are trying to do that. But that could actually be a factor for you, depending on, well, as opposed to a Severn. Get it? Factor? No, okay, anyways, moving on. So there are some legal questions about that, and it is something you're going to want to keep in mind. The other thing I want to bring up about this guy that I'm not a big fan of is the relative weakness of the detent, right? This guy, and I'm going to try and hold this, I am not touching any of the important actuators here. All I need to do here, I'll try and stay entirely on camera here. This is not straightforward to do horizontally. But you can very much pop this guy open with centripetal force, right? It is not hard. And as a result, although this isn't going to come open in your pocket necessarily, it is not the most trustworthy and strong of detents out there, right? This is actually a place where I kind of would have liked to have seen just a mounting hole or something for a magnet in there for him to do a detent, because this is, of course, the person who does magnetic detents everywhere else. I feel like that might have made this a little bit more compelling, although it certainly would have reduced the utility of the stealth lock here. So that might be an option he considers in future rounds, right? To give you a place that you can slip in a magnet here to increase the detent, as an option for folks who really do want that extra positive retention and bias. Well, it does have some bias towards closure, but to get that stronger retention going. Right, that is the other downside to this as far as I can see. Aside from that, honestly, it's really cool, right? Like I said, we're seeing a sliding bar lock, but we're seeing it done a little bit better materially. We're seeing this bacon lasering, which is unusual, right? It's kind of... I can't think of anybody who has done this on a production scale before. Bacon Damascus is a thing. It's a really cool thing, right? And it's really interesting, but the way that it's done here with the laser... There's a feeling of quantization here that is very, very deeply appealing to me as a digital signal processing nerd. But, and the fact that it also matches on the clip, although it is worth noting that the pattern is different on the clip. I would have preferred if the pattern had flowed through here. Anyways, I digress. Although it's more subtle this way, certainly. But there's just a lot that he's doing right here. It's a relatively simple knife, but it feels like it's done well in every meaningful way, possibly accepting that detent. And aside from the legal question, which, by the way, I'm completely overblowing, and for many people, you are not the kind of person who a police officer who might stop and harass about the exact nature of the opening mechanism on your knife. If that's true, then congratulations, you're lucky. But that is sort of a thing you want to consider. I am feeling a little tiny bit of stick, which is making me feel like I want to, and I never did actually, lubricate this blade tang right here in the back. Right, I'll just pop a little tiny bit of lubrication on there. Yeah, there we go. Resolved. Beautiful, although that actually might weaken the detent a little further. No, actually, we should be okay. All right, beautiful. So that's my overall thought here, right? It's a little pricey, certainly. Oh, the other thing I'll comment on is the size is a little bit weird, right? Because in terms of the overall blade length here, we are going to be measuring it, being as uncharitable as we can. It's around 3.25 inches, but the size of the whole thing is quite large. Right? I mean, if we compare it next to the fact that it is a much, much larger knife. And so in many ways, I had sort of thought that it's weird because it's a very big handle and the blade is relatively small. And this kind of bearded look is definitely a WinterBlade Co thing, right? We've seen it on the Factor before, and it's a great sharpening choil, to be clear. You're going to be able to sharpen this right up until about here with no difficulty. And if you've sharpened it that much, then frankly, you should probably stop using a bench grinder. But still, there is just not a whole lot of sharpened blade here, because the sharpened blade of this guy, even though it is a 3.25-inch blade, is only around 2.75. So it is not the most space-efficient thing ever. But that's, again, not the end of the world, and it may be something that for somebody with nice large hands, as, for instance, my token large hands consultant carried this, or looked this and went, yeah, that's about right for me. And so, you know, that's going to be great for some people, but for me it feels a little bit inefficient, right? The increase in sharpened length over the factor is just not large, but the handle size increase is very large. So in many ways, I actually hope that we get a smaller version of the Severn, right? That would be kind of interesting. Maybe the Cirques? Get it? Instead of 7, it's 6, the Cirques? No? Okay. Anyways, I digress. Or even the Ferv. I would probably buy a Ferv. This is, so it's a little bit on the bigger side, and I'd kind of like to see a smaller version of it come through. And there does even feel to be a little bit of extra space down at the end here that could have just been removed even on this guy. I get, again, trying to really give an option for people with huge hands, and that's great, but it is not necessarily that. So anyways, that's my feeling here is, yeah, it's pricey, absolutely. But I do like the fact that you're going to have those lower price models, including the aluminum and the G10 here, and you're getting something that is different, right? It's certainly another sliding bar lock, but it's one that's done better in a couple of meaningful ways, and one that I kind of does hope, yeah, sure, that's how verbs work, that I does hope catches on in the greater knife market. If you could license this, that could be a way for a number of people to start putting these kinds of sliding bar style locks in without the kind of awkwardness of the sort of, and in many ways, by the way, the clear point of comparison here that's worth bringing out is the Demco shock lock, right? Which is in some ways a similar idea, right? You have an internal coil spring here. You pull this part back. Here, there's no actual bar that you're moving in, so it's not a sliding bar lock so much, but it does have a little nubbin that goes up onto the blade at a certain point. And so if you want to think of it like this, it functions a lot like a shock lock, right? But anyways, I really do hope that this kind of sliding bar lock becomes a little bit more popular and freezes from the tyranny of Axis springs and the temptation to break when you need them most. But anyways, like I said, I think it's pretty cool. Price-wise, a little high, but you've got those budget options out there. The tent could use a little less, a little bit more strengthening in the future, but if you're looking for something that's a little bit unusual, a little bit off the beaten path, as WinterBlade Co. usually does, and you're looking for a different take on a very classic lock kind of design, then by God, this may be a very interesting knife for you. So anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you, that you get a chance to watch this review sometime in the winter. That would make more sense. And, I think this one, they might have made a winner here. How did I not use that one before? Maybe I already did. Anyways, hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves several wonderful rest of your days. Bye now.